Yeah, welcome. This video is going to be more critical than some of my earlier ones, and I just want to get some stuff off my chest, so if nothing else it's really good therapy for myself. We're going to be having a look at one of the most famous papers in the context of leadership that's ever been published, so big billing from Mark there. It's by a late professor from Harvard Business School, Abraham Zaleznik, and his paper title is "Managers and Leaders, Are They Different?" So this was published in Harvard Business School's Practitioner magazine, Harvard Business Review, and it was published in 1977. It's been reprinted many times, but it's always good to go back to the first publication. 1977 was a long time ago. Why do academics cite it? They cite it because some of them say it's the evidence why we shift from management to leadership. I'm certainly not convinced by that, but anyway, it gets cited to this day, and I'm not sure why, but it had a big impact in that it was behind the shift from management to leadership, which was very much in the air back in the 70s, 80s. Remember, America was suffering in terms of its car industry in particular from the threat of the Japanese back in the day. It's the Chinese today, but back then it was the Japanese. And so if I give you a few opening lines, it'll give you a flavour of it. Most societies, and that includes business organisations, are caught between two conflicting needs, one for managers to maintain the balance of operations and one for leaders to create new approaches and imagine new areas to explore. What you see there is leadership being sexed up, mundane status quo management, sexy leadership. And that's where it all began, and that's what's fascinated me in later years in my writing. What was happening was American businesses were requesting that. So this wasn't a research-informed evidence-based shift. It was about a shift that was requested by American businesses. In particular, one of these was J.D. Rockefeller, one of the billionaires of that era, a philanthropist who supported research but also had huge business interests. On the opening page, Zaleznik quotes from Rockefeller, so he's not hiding it, and this is verbatim from Rockefeller being quoted by Zaleznik in the opening of this paper. An organisation is a system with a logic of its own and all the weight of tradition and inertia. The deck is stacked in favour of tried and proven ways of doing things and against the taking of risks and striking out in new directions. So businesses wanted a shift, and they got it through leadership. But they requested it and it was delivered. That's the point people don't get. They sometimes think, so there was some theory. It was, and then to this day they ask for, better leadership theory. But this was a cultural shift. Might have been good, might have been bad, but it's been turned into like an academic enterprise later in life. So Zaleznik was a professor of social psychology, which is interesting and relevant. He was differentiating the personality type of the leader and the manager in this paper. Importantly, the paper didn't have any references, no references at all. Academics still cite it, weirdly. Had no methods, no methodology, not even a hint of research. And Zaleznik himself says it was a working paper prepared for Time Inc.'s conference on leadership in Washington. So, some thoughts, a bit like these thoughts to video, but not an academic enterprise. So the gist of the paper really is about setting up a differentiation between leading and management. And you'll hear people saying leading is about leading change and all that sort of thing, and managing is about managing the status quo. To me, that's a complete false dichotomy. The two are closely intertwined, and this idea of this artificial separation I've had to live through annoys me, it frustrates me, but I don't know if I'm ever going to change anyone's mind, but I'll give you the bit I talk to in workshops, because it is entertaining. So he stereotypes managers and leaders, and I'll give you the stereotype of the leader first. Leaders work from high-risk positions, indeed, often are temperamentally disposed to seek out risk and danger, especially where opportunity and reward appear high. So you get this sexing up of leadership, high risk. So I look around because I'm in a very public forest and people keep wandering by. So I'm in a high risk environment, aren't I? Anyway, that's the stereotype that was encouraged by Harvard back in the 70s and has persisted ever since. If you go to a business school and you go to the business management students, they want to be leaders now, they don't want to be managers. And business schools make huge amounts of money out of that, so business schools aren't going to come out of this sort of stuff, I'm afraid. But, sorry, what drives me, I don't want to just come across as a cynic, I get that, you know, they're in the business of making money, aren't they? But then schools and hospitals take on this nonsense and they don't drill back and see that it's a cultural shift aimed at improving businesses and business profitability. Whether or not it improves the delivery of education and healthcare, I would choose to differ. Anyway, the stereotype of the manager, and I love this, it sort of captures me almost. So this is how he juxtaposes managers and leaders. We had the leaders high risk and, you know, tough and seeking danger. The manager prefer to work with people. They avoid solitary activity because it makes them anxious. That's on page 72 of this nonsense. And people cite it to this day, you know, Harvard professor, Harvard Business Review. No, it's just a load of nonsense. It's got nothing to do with theory or any sort of empirical work. It was a cultural shift that explicitly businesses wanted. They even put out adverts, which I talk about in some of my books, where they said, let's get rid of management, full-page adverts. That's what they wanted, that's what's delivered. It's a cultural shift. So hopefully I conveyed the nonsense of it. I just want to share something that's related, that is deeply sinister. So he reaches to his bookshelf in his forest, and he's got a whole series of books on the shelf there, and he's got this one. And I don't know if you can read it, but the title is The Managerial Mystique, and it is the follow-up book by Zaleznik, which came out in '89. And it comes in 5 parts: the argument, the analysis, the consequences, the cure, and the conclusions. So management's the problem. Zaleznik explicitly says he was uneasy with the cooperative approach to running businesses that had crept into the psyche of America, and he strongly challenges that and problematizes management. He then goes on to offer, as he says, the cure, leadership. And I went through this book, as I do often. I'm a scholar rather than a researcher, I should add. So I read too many books. I spend my time in forests now. Back in the day, I did used to read a lot of books and papers, and I was deeply troubled because he lets his guard down a bit when you get into this book, which is a far deeper read than the magazine article. This is verbatim, it's page 25 if there are any scholars watching this video. Managers tend to fear aggression as a force leading to chaos, yet many psychological theories hold that aggression plays a constructive part in work, and indeed that there can be no useful work without its release. So I hope you get the significance and why this troubled me. It's the idea that managers went aggressive, leaders were aggressive, and American businesses needed to move towards more aggressive approaches. As a soft liberal, I find that appalling. And yet I've seen it in organisations where people misunderstand the notion of leadership. And leadership is about asking questions, it's about cooperation, it's about dialogue. They lose that and they say, just do it. and whether or not it's women or men, you see them really enjoying the aggression of their role. And what I'm trying to tell you is, for those academics who cite Zaleznik, they're doing exactly what he suggested. They're using aggression rather than cooperation, communication, any of the things that ethical organisations would embrace. And that's in black and white. If we turn over the page 26, and again verbatim from this Harvard professor, leaders comfortable with aggression often create a climate of ferment that intensifies individual motivation. So any of you working out there in the real world, you're living through this. Just to repeat, leaders comfortable with aggression often create a climate of ferment that intensifies individual motivation. So that is the pretext behind leadership. It doesn't have to be that way. I need to say I'm fascinated by leadership. I write a lot on it. I've encountered some wonderful leaders who are actually ethical and moral, but I've also encountered some really evil people who use this loose academic concept that academics haven't really explained properly, and they use it as a pretext for aggression, for bullying, for damaging organisations, for damaging people's lives. So, very strong words from me. I think the last video was loved up, and I'm sure the next few will be, but I just have had an urge to get that off my chest. The good thing is nobody watches these videos. It's just an old bloke in a forest talking to the trees.